2020 Democratic presidential candidate and the mayor of the city I happen to be in today, Bill de Blasio. Mr. Mayor, those are some rough words. You took it very personally and understandably so. There are some that are going to say, whoa, wait a minute. Aren't you overreacting? He didn't support the segregationists. He was trying to make a point about civility. What do you say to that explanation?
Chuck, it is entirely personal for me. I think it's personal for millions and millions of Americans when they hear this. My wife is African American. We have two beautiful children. James Eastland literally thought my wife and I should not have the legal right to marry, that those children should not exist, that our children should not be on this earth. That's how personal it is for me. That's how personal it is for my wife, Shirlane. When you hear that coming from someone who wants to be the standard bearer of our party, it makes you ask the question, how on earth does he not understand what people are feeling today? James Eastland used to get away with it. And all that civility, that status quo, somehow allowed an overt segregationist to continue in his role as a committee chairman in the Senate, a man of great importance and responsibility, even though he blatantly wanted to see discrimination against tens of millions of Americans. It could not be more personal for so many of us. So I think the bottom line here is, why on earth would a Democrat speak nostalgically of working with a segregationist? It's one thing to say...
Wait, you say nostalgic. He called Herman Talmadge one of the meanest guys he ever knew. That wasn't... It's hard to say he was being nostalgic. He wasn't longing for those good old days.
Well, he was... Here's saying one thing my wife Shirlane says, and I think it's a powerful point. The good old days were not so good
for anybody.
Many Americans. For
if
people
you were,
of color,
it was only good
women.
if you were white and male.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. In that comment was a sense of, oh, we used to be able to work it out. We used to be able to make things happen. Why don't we go back to that? Mm-hmm. What is unacceptable is to invoke someone who did so much harm. Eastland helped to perpetuate segregation, and a lot of the same things we're still trying to overcome in terms of economic injustice, legal injustice to this day. So my problem is I want our candidate to be someone who's in touch with today's Democratic Party, the reality of today's America. I don't know. I respect Joe Biden. I respect his public service. I don't know, Chuck, how on earth he could have used that example. And he was saying we could work with these guys. Well, you know what? Today, I would say a lot of us couldn't work with a segregationist. It doesn't matter if they were nice enough.
There are going to be some people who hear this and say, oh, for good grief, don't you see who's in the White House? Are you really going to hold Joe Biden up to this to the same and sort of attack him in the same way you should be going after Donald Trump?
It's not an attack when Joe Biden, who wants to be our nominee, says something that's very hurtful to millions and millions of people, including millions of people who are the backbone of our party. And I think the place this takes us, Chuck, is to say, what are we going to be? Are we the party of the status quo? Is that what Democrats want again? I think you just made a very powerful point about Donald Trump's rally. Somehow, as if a magician, he is saying, I'm against the status quo. The President of the United States, how can the President of the United States be against the status quo? He is the guy who gave a huge tax cut to the wealthy and the corporations, the cabinet full of billionaires, but he's trying to run as the outsider. If we put up a status quo politician, if we somehow seem to be the party of Washington, D.C. and government of decades and decades of status quo, it guarantees Donald Trump the race he wants.
What's the line here? Harry Truman was personally apparently a racist, though he did some things publicly to try to desegregate the military. He certainly didn't say some kind things. FDR worked with segregationists to get the New Deal through. When do we stop arguing about that? How do we get over that? I mean, we sort of have to come to grips that with our history, some segregationists gave us some things that were good with the New Deal. Like, how do you come to grips with that?
We're living a lot of the painful policies that those segregationists gave us right this minute. Just talk to tens of millions of people in this country, African Americans, but also Latinos, working class people, so many people who are struggling today because those policies never really went away. We have a level of economic injustice and disparity in this country that is absolutely holding back millions of people. It never got changed, Chuck. It never went away. And so when you invoke the past, if you're talking about Truman, Roosevelt, decades and decades ago, that's one thing. Joe Biden was talking about someone he served in the Senate with.
Which was decades and decades ago,
right,
by the way.
But it's one thing if he said, here's all the things that I've done to break that. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, he was speaking about a civility and a way of doing things that somehow he was expressing virtue in. That civility gave us today's status quo that is still not working for so many millions of people. And so you can't separate from it if you don't acknowledge that what we have today is still fundamentally unjust and must be overturned. And I'll tell you, and you've watched us in New York City, I've done very, very aggressive things to break that status quo that comes with plenty of criticism, plenty of opposition. But you have to put money back in the hands of folks who have suffered, the working class people, people of color. You have to give opportunity. You have to break down all sorts of barriers. We can't have a Democrat talking about that broken past as if there was virtue in it. There wasn't.
I'm curious, were you uncomfortable with the way Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez compared what's going on down at the border with concentration camps? Because some people took offense to that, to wait a minute. And this gets at language. This goes to the same thing.
100%.
This is somebody who may not understand what that means to some people.
They are entirely different realities. Yeah.
And so she was wrong, and you would be critical of her. You would tell her not to use that language?
I respect her greatly, and I feel very close to her in terms of philosophy, but of course she was wrong. You cannot compare what the Nazis did in concentration camps, unfortunately, is without any historical. I mean, it's a horrible moment in history. There's no way to compare.
This does feel as if a little bit you jumping on Biden and others jumping on Biden, that this is symbolic of what you think the bigger issue is with Joe Biden. Is that fair?
Of course. Look, anyone might say something in isolation. The problem.
I mean, would this cost you not to vote for Joe Biden if it were Joe Biden and Donald Trump?
I've been 100% clear.
Okay.
I would support Joe Biden if he were the nominee, just like I know he'd support me if I were the nominee. But the question is, who should be the nominee? What is our party about today? And how are we going to beat Donald Trump? If we're the party of status quo, we lose. Donald Trump can win this election. I know a lot of my friends who are Democrats and progressives don't like to hear that, but it's true. Donald Trump can win this election if Democrats make the 2016 mistake and we seem to be the party of the elite and the party of status quo. Not only will working class white folks in places like the Midwest say that's not for me, a whole lot of people of color, a whole lot of progressives, a whole lot of young people will stay home and not vote if they feel the Democratic Party is just trying to preserve what is and not fundamentally create fairness and put working people first in this country. My fear when I hear something like that nostalgia for the past, is it failed. And I've heard other things that he said, that obviously the Hyde Amendment comment and other things that show he fails to understand that people don't want that status quo anymore and that we must break from it to be the party of change and the party of working people.
The one thing that will get thrown out here is that, here's the Democrats being too politically correct, always jumping on something, and it's that got Donald Trump elected.
Donald Trump got elected because the Democratic Party was not definable and identifiable to working class people. They did not think it was the party of working people, and a lot of folks stayed home, or some people went and voted for Trump. When the Democratic Party, which for decades was clearly the party of working people, and that's what we've done here in New York, put money back in the hands of working people. When the Democratic Party once again is identified that way, you'll see clear, strong majorities. I think we're going to have an amazing turnout in 2020. I think we have a moment of historic potential change, but only if people look at our nominee and say, that person's going to change my life and make my life better.
Give me this elevator pitch for you. I look at the progressive lane, and you have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They proposing anything you don't like?
They're proposing a lot of very good things, and I like them.
Why you and not them?
I'm someone who's done those things in the nation's biggest city. It's the biggest city. It's the most diverse place in America. It's a tough place, as you know, a tough place to get things done. But I've given pre-K to all our kids. We've done paid sick leave for working people, so they don't have to choose between going to work and getting a day's pay or going to the doctor. We're guaranteeing health care for anyone who does not have insurance, giving them a primary care doctor so they can get help. These things are happening right now. There's a lot of good people running. My argument to Americans is I've done these things already, so you know who I am and you know I can do it for you.
You're getting a lot of tough press in New York City.
That's the nature of the New York City press.
I was just going to say, do you feel as though that does that hurt you, you think?
I think it's a good grounding. I think if you want to be commander-in-chief.
You certainly aren't, you're not getting a big head is what you're saying.
One. Two, if you want to be commander-in-chief, if you want to run the federal government, if you want to lead the American people, you better be able to take the heat in the kitchen. This is the toughest media environment and the toughest place in the country.
So what you're saying is if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere?
If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Come on.
That's really snappy.
I don't know.
That's good.
All right. Bill de Blasio from New York City. Be safe on the trail.
Thank you, brother.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.